and I said, I have an idea to teach a class to women on home repair. And she goes, great, we start in 4 weeks. I'm like, oh my God, I have to put a curriculum together. What am I teaching? And I put this 5-week course together, and it's still the core curriculum that I'm teaching 10 years later.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of In the Den. This is going to be another She Handles It takeover. I am CJ Bachmann, and today I am joined with Beth Allen. Beth is with DIY Hip Chicks. Welcome, Beth.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Before we get started, I want to make sure the audience fully understands the spectrum of everything that you cover here. So besides being the founder of DIY Hip Chicks, you also empower homeowners through that to save money, stress, and time. You're also a speaker, an author, an RN, a licensed contractor. You've been featured on TV over 100 times, including The Rachel Ray Show. And you have an active YouTube channel that has over 3 million views.
Yes.
I got that. Am I missing anything?
Mom of 3 kids and happily married.
I mean, those are both feats in themselves,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So tell everybody a little bit about DIY Hip Chicks, what it is, what it's about, where it came about.
It was about 10 years ago. I had this idea that I wanted to teach other women how to do home improvements. All of my friends said, how do you know how to do all these things around your house? Because I had taken our cookie cutter suburban home and I started doing electric and plumbing and drywall and carpentry. And they're all like, how do you know how to do this? And I'm like, I don't know. I just do. And I read and I research and I talk to the guys in Home Depot and talk to contractor buddies. So I approached the woman that ran the adult evening school in my school district. And I said, I have an idea to teach a class to women on home repair. And she goes, great, we start in 4 weeks. I'm like, oh my God, I have to put a curriculum together. What am I teaching? And I put this 5-week course together, and it's still the core curriculum that I'm teaching 10 years later.
That is so great. How did you get into teaching? Was that, I mean, obviously
that was my first time.
That was it. Wow. They just opened the doors.
They just said, okay. And I love her for having, just accepted me and given me that opportunity. I've since taught probably thousands of women in different venues, either online or, in person. I've spoken at the Philly Home Show, all these venues. And for me, it's just about helping homeowners understand the basic things that they can do themselves, that they don't need a contractor for, that if they knew that it was a 5-minute fix, they'd be able to save that money, stress, and time. And they're not waiting days to pay somebody $100 to fix something that could have taken 5 minutes, if they only knew.
Right, absolutely. And I love the fact that you are really trying to educate and target women specifically, right? We are the first to reach out to someone for help because it's not something maybe that we've done in the past, or maybe we don't think that we have time. So what are some of the things that you find homeowners asking about the most when they're in this class or when they're kind of going through things? What's the biggest thing that you feel like is so easy that people tend to just overlook?
There's just a lot of everyday little things. And, caulking is a huge thing. People don't realize the power of caulking their tub, their shower, their sinks, their windows, and even their baseboards. So that is one really interesting thing, that so many people are intimidated by a caulk gun. And I'm like, this is so easy. And every time I show them how to open a tube of caulk, which is like my #1 video currently, everybody goes, that's it? And I'm like, yeah, that's it. They're like, it's so easy. I'm like, yeah, it is. So caulking is a big one. Light electric and plumbing, problem solving, learning when not to have to call the pro. And what is that thing that they can fix all by themselves?
Yeah, and sometimes I think it's about understanding, like you had mentioned about baseboards, right? People don't understand how much of your heating and air conditioning can leak through the baseboards, or especially if you have multiple, levels to your home, how much energy you could be potentially wasting.
Right. Not to mention all the ants that love to crawl through your baseboard cracks.
Absolutely. Or in my case, it would be, spiders when the seasons change, and it's just like, but I don't mind. I love animals and creatures alike. So hey,
I just escort them out in a cup.
Same thing. My daughter would kill me if she saw me squishing them. So it's like, Mom, can we save them? So where does the desire to speak with women's groups and young adults come from? Can you tell me a little bit about your background and why this is so important to you?
When I was growing up, we were a blue-collar family. My mom stayed home because that was kind of the thing to do. And we lived paycheck to paycheck many times in my life. And I remember what it was like when the tub had a massive leak and was leaking into our kitchen, and we had to open up the ceiling, and the panic and the tears and the anxiety and stress that came from having to call a plumber. Did they have the few $100s to get it fixed? And for me, being able to empower other women to not have to deal with that kind of stress, to me, is really huge. My mom was the doer in our house. My dad was the brawn, but she was the brains behind the projects. So I learned from that female role model of, you picked up tools and you fixed things. You didn't wait around for the guy to help you. And for me, I like teaching that mindset that we don't have to sit around and wait for anybody to come and bail us out. And in my classes, I say to women all the time, we, whether we've chosen or we've been blessed to be able to, we have the ability to give birth to a human being.
Right.
Why do we let the toilet intimidate us?
Yeah.
It's porcelain bolted to the floor.
Yeah.
Like, my goodness, we've given birth, we've raised children, we've gone to college, we've been widowed, we've been divorced, we've tackled all these incredible things in our life. Don't be intimidated by your home.
So it's more about confidence, right? It's about
So
sharing
much.
that confidence. And you were lucky. You mentioned your mom, and I saw you at one of the lower bug chambers things, and you were very open and candid about, your history and your story, which was lovely. But for me, it was the reverse, right? I had a dad who basically was like, hey, listen, you can do anything the boys can do. And I don't know if that was because he really wanted me to have those skill sets, which I like to think that it is, or just because I was one of his children and he had this idea that as the oldest, I had these responsibilities. So I tackle things a lot differently, right? Yep. I am the female on a ladder, hanging by an edge, trying to, and they're like, why didn't you ask for help? Or I'm toting 15 boxes, around. And maybe I'm the opposite end of the spectrum where I need to ask for help sometimes.
I need to ask for more help too.
Yeah. But having that confidence to be like, you know what, I can go onto YouTube and I can, find this out. I can try to see if I can, tackle it and see what all it entails. I think is super important.
Yeah, and for me, getting to young girls is important too. I've spoken to a number of high school groups, and I love getting to these young girls who are still being fed from society this idea that we have to defer our choices or our opinions, our income, all of those things to a partner in our life.
Right.
And it doesn't need to be that way. And especially because I've had a challenging mother experience when I was a late teen and in my 20s, if I can speak to those young girls and give them the confidence to be able to say, I deserve good things, I deserve unconditional love, I deserve respect. And when girls have that kind of self-respect and self-confidence, the doors open for them and less problems tend to fall their way.
And I think you also hit it on the head too. It's like what was expected before versus what was expected now. What was the norm, right? Women were historically, taught that their job was to be in the home, being that homemaker, and the male was the breadwinner, and they needed to have that counterpart to kind of balance them.
Yep. Or you were teachers and nurses.
Absolutely.
Which I chose the nurse path.
yeah, you did. And now it's different, and I think that women need to realize the importance of independence, right, instead of that codependency.
Right.
And that was one of the things that really, honestly, it just drew me to you as you were talking, because I work really hard. I have a 19-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter. And anybody that knows me and knows my parenting style can know how important it is for my kids to have this level of independence, right? I was just with someone this weekend, and they were talking about how their 10-year-old was hesitant and shy to, walk up and pay for something. And, my 6-year-old, if I'm there and I can see her and there's nobody else there, I want to encourage her to order her food and things like that. And other parents, they want the same. So it's just kind of trying to break that mold and build that independence, whether it's male or female. I think it's important, but especially in the young females.
Yeah, and I'm the mother of 3 boys, and they cook, they clean. My middle child bakes the best batch of chocolate chip cookies you'd ever want. And all of my kids will pick up tools. When my son, the oldest one, went to college, I guess it was like 6 weeks in, there was some formal event. He calls me and he goes, you'll never believe what I just did. And he sends me a photo over the text of him sewing the spaghetti strap back onto one of the girls' dresses.
Oh, there you
because he was the only one who had a sewing kit and knew how to use it.
Yeah.
So for me, a lot of this stuff, even though I target women, is really cross-gender. It's about being an independent adult.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I talked about it on one of the other episodes. My son graduated last year, and all of his friends, they all, went off to college. Some of them had never done their laundry before. And I was like, well, this should be fun, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then all I could think about was, the old movies where you saw the kids coming home from college with the garbage bags full of clothes and dropping them at mom's doorstep. And I'm like, thank God that's not me.
That's not me either.
So let's shift away a little bit from the DIY world, and we'll get back to some of that. But you also founded the Forgotten Caregiver Dementia Program.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that and where that came from.
It came out of a recent caregiver experience. It was about 2 years ago, right after COVID kind of began. My aunt, who has no children but 7 nieces and nephews, reached out and said, I think I need to go to independent living. Now, she was living in Center City alone on Rittenhouse Square, and she'd always been highly independent and capable. We saw that she was, a little frailer over the last 6 months or a year and all of that. So when she said, it's time to go, we were all like, yes, let's look around. So we started shopping and finding places. Well, we quickly realized she was probably in a stage 3 or 4 of dementia.
Okay.
And we just missed it. Well, I was the director of nursing at a retirement home. I ran the well clinic. I was the one who did the dementia screenings. I was the one who would call the families and say, Mom's slipping. I think we need to step up services. But I missed it in my own relative because it's your own person,
right.
And you don't want to or just don't see the things that are failing. So fast forward, it has been a year and a half, almost 2 years now, and it was a hell ride with my aunt's dementia breakdown, her psychotic breaks, 2 psych visits, calling me 57 times a day. I got the high score for all the family. And being this caregiver during the height of COVID, where we couldn't even see her.
Right.
And I was just on the phone with her trying to navigate. And I realized my own siblings and cousins were struggling because they didn't understand it. And why don't I take my aunt's experience and what I've learned, that I'm all about taking pain and making a purpose out of it.
Absolutely.
So I decided to start the Forgotten Caregiver so that I can teach families early onset, what do you see, what are the changes, prepare them for what's ahead, the diagnostic experience, the stages, because people don't understand, and how to prepare themselves for the grief, because the grief comes multiple times. Every time there's a setback, there's more grief. And you lose your person multiple times until the end. But for me, it's about teaching families that their loved one may forget them, but they're not forgotten. And all the work that they do will never be forgotten.
How can people get involved?
Right now, we have a website that's going to be going live very soon called ForgottenCaregiver.com.
Okay, perfect.
And there'll be a way for people to sign up. We'll be doing a YouTube channel as well. We'll have a newsletter, and I'll be starting a live class initially, and then it'll go to being a pre-recorded class with a Facebook group and resources.
And that's great. I mean, right now, too, with technology advancing and modern science advancing, we're able to identify things a lot sooner than what we were before. So I think that's where people need help navigating and kind of understanding those stages, because it's one thing to notice someone slipping a little bit, but it's definitely different when you are educated and know that there's going to be so many different stages, and that this is just the beginning of a road that's going to be, just as hard for them, even harder than it is for the caregivers who, are there. But both people have to work together. So.
Right. And for me, it's all about education, whether it's educating someone about the home or it's educating them about their health and wellness and dementia. When you understand something and you're aware, you can act. And when you're not aware and you don't understand what's happening, you don't know what to do, and you don't know how to take action. And one of the taglines that I use in the DIY side, and I realize is certainly fully applicable to the dementia side, is that doing it yourself doesn't mean doing it alone.
Yeah. I mean, and you could apply that to marketing too, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same thing. And I was thinking as you were talking, even with marketing, if you are prepared, you can be way more proactive, right?
Yes.
When you're reactive, it's not always the best you, right? You're just
Yep.
in that moment, you're in the problem mode, how do I fix it? And you're just kind of
Yep.
jumping to solve whatever you can at that moment versus being prepared and knowing what's coming so that you can actually handle it more proactively.
Yes. Yep, proactive instead of reactive.
Oh, absolutely. So for all the girls watching right now, I know you have a special offer for them, and that's free access to the Guide to Caulk course, right?
Yes.
How can they find more information about that if they want to join in?
You can go to my website, which is DIYHipChicks.com, and right there on the front, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and we will send you the caulk guide. And it's very simple. It takes you through how to open the tube of caulk, where you would use different kinds of caulk, whether it's kitchen, bath, baseboard, outside, all of those things. Easy peasy. If you can put icing on a cake, you can caulk a tub.
There you go. And, Hip Chicks isn't just a fun name, right? It's, home improvement projects. And that's so important. There's so many things that we can do on our own. Now, you also have a book,
Yes.
right? And Flush the Fear. And we'll make sure that everybody has access and knows where to get it when we put this episode out on social media. But tell me a little bit about the book and what people can find inside the book.
The book came out of two things. It came out of, my DIY experience and also my mom experience. When I was 19, my mom had an emotional and mental breakdown, refused to get help. I think she was going through menopause and, just the life changes that I know I am going through right now at 50. And you're like, why am I so sad today? And all of those things. And she refused to get help, but our family dynamic began to spiral out of control. She was into a depression, anxiety, and seriously needed mental help, but refused. And it got to a point that I started to go downhill with my own mental health, trying to be in nursing school and come home and deal with my mother's, well-being. It was too much, and I went into really dark places. I was lucky that I had people around me to scoop me up, point me in the right direction, remind me that I deserved unconditional love, and put me on the right path. Unfortunately, my relationship with mom dissolved, but I moved out and realized I needed to take care of my own mental health. I don't regret that. It's a shame that we couldn't have shared the ride together. So Flush the Fear came out of what were the tools that helped me keep my sanity,
right,
and still thrive as a woman whose own mother wasn't a part of her life. And to this day, I still struggle with self-worth, because when your own mom doesn't want to be there for you by choice, you wonder why anybody else does.
Right.
And there's a lot to swallow, but I've used the tools that I use for projects as metaphors, as to how people can tap into a toolbox and find the strength to deal with all the crap that life throws our way. And I wear a hammer on my neck, and the hammer is a reminder to connect with people, whether it's for help that you need, whether it's to support others, but connecting is the number one thing we need to do as human beings to be able to get through this crazy thing called life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the biggest things when Britt and I were sitting in that chamber meeting and we were listening to you kind of come up and you were talking about fear and just your story, I recently started a blog, She Handles It, and it really is all about a mindset, right? It's not being afraid to tackle the things that we need to do. It doesn't mean we have to do everything,
No.
and we agree on that. But it means that we need to be responsible for the outcome of what we're looking to achieve, and asking for the right type of help or delegating as necessary. But one of the exercises that you did during that, and I know it's in the book as well, I found really unique because I do a lot of reading. So whether it's Brene Brown, Rachel Hollis, Mel Robbins, I can't remember who it was, but they kind of talk a lot about something very similar, which is identifying what's holding you back, right? What is that thing? So in this book, and hopefully everybody can see it, there's a small piece of toilet paper, right? And the thought process behind this is actually flushing your fear. What is that fear that you want to get rid of? What is that one thing that's holding you back? Write it down, stick it in, and flush it away. And I know for me, it really resonated with those authors because they talk a lot about like imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Stepping into a big role like the CEO role. It wasn't so much about me feeling like an imposter, but it's like, are people going to look at me as being in the wrong seat and being in the wrong place? And that was something that a couple of years ago I had to say, I don't care. I don't care what they think. I know what I'm capable of. I know what I'm doing. What are some of the methodologies you have behind flushing that fear?
I think it's, standing back and recognizing. Back in high school, we all worried that everybody was looking at us and judging us all the time. And as you get older, you realize people aren't looking at you. They're so caught up in their own stuff, that you can just focus on yourself. One of the other things that I use for myself all the time is that idea of duct tape. And I use the duct tape as a tool because we say really negative things to ourselves as women. Whether we're judging, like we were chatting before we started, about hair and wrinkles and our weight and all these things. And we have to shut down that negative voice so that we can focus on all the positive things that we bring to the table. And, it's same thing for imposter syndrome, and of being like, well, I'm not experienced enough or educated enough. And no, I have the people personality. I have this skill set to rally people as a CEO and to do all those things. Really looking at the positives versus the negatives. And for me, I tell people to take duct tape, put it on an index card, and hang it in their bathroom as a reminder to put duct tape on the mouth of their inner voice that says you're not enough, because you are.
I think that women suffer much more with an inner dialogue, a negative inner dialogue, than our male counterparts, and that's for sure. And I think that that's the over analytical, the thought, the processing, the pieces that make us a good, make us good mothers and good caregivers and things like that, is the same piece that kind of tears us
ourselves
down. Yeah, absolutely. So I love that, and I talk about inner dialogue all the time because it is so important, and it's one thing that we have control over, and people don't realize it.
We do.
You can identify that thought that you just had, and then get rid of it, replace it with what is real, not what is, that fake fear that you're putting in there, but what's real. Like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Or why can't I fix my toilet? Why can't I caulk my baseboards? Like, what is it that's holding me back from doing it?
And I find most of the time when I'm teaching women, it is the fear. It's the fear of making a mistake. It's the fear of not knowing enough, of being judged because you did it wrong, and just the fear of taking that leap. I'm sitting here in this room with all these lion heads, staring at me. And, it is about being, the king of the jungle and being like, I can do this. I can do hard things, these other mentors. I love all the ladies that you mentioned. I did have a mentor that sat me down a long time ago, and she said, I want you to write on a piece of paper 3 columns. And this is also in the book. 3 columns of hell yes, hell no, and maybe. And ask yourself, do you want to be doing this aspect of your life in 5 months, 5 years? Do you want to be doing those things? And at the time I was making window treatments in my basement, and I put it in the hell no category because I need to be with people. Yeah. And sewing alone in the basement wasn't what I wanted. And, it's crazy when you just start putting things out there and you say yes to things, how doors open. 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call from a man in Chicago who knows a friend of our family to ask me to be on a startup board for a company serving women homeowners. And that's all I can share about it. But I was standing in my family room and I'm like, okay, I'm in. And then he says to me, well, I think I want you to be the CEO. And I'm like, well, let's just say I'm in and we'll see where it goes. But I didn't say no. Yeah. I was like, yeah. Like,
you didn't
why
stop.
couldn't I?
You didn't second guess yourself.
Right.
Yeah. It fits. It's funny that you bring up the columns because I am an advocate for the stop, start, and repeat. And we work with a couple different partners, and it's one thing that's kind of part of their business model as they look at it. And we do that here at One SEO, and I even do that in my life. What do I need to start doing that I'm not doing now, right? What do I need to stop doing that I'm doing that is not fulfilling, any of my goals that I have? And what are the things that I'm doing that I need to keep doing or do more of. And I think that that's something that we need to take inventory on a regular basis, because as we grow, as we evolve, our goals can change and shift. It doesn't mean our core goal doesn't, but how we get there, what our skill set is, it changes as we learn and as we experience ourselves. So taking that inventory and really doing those columns and thinking, okay, where do I want to be now? What do I need to, what's taking up my time that I could delegate to someone else or put in that hell no column, because it's like, this is not serving me.
Exactly. I had one of those moments last week because I got that CEO call one day, and then a few days later, a project that I've been working on for a couple years, because I was away on vacation and timing and a whole bunch of issues that came up, an opportunity was pulled out from under me and given to someone else. And at first I was really upset. And then I realized, you know what? This company that I was working with didn't value me.
Right.
And it was time for me to part. I had already been having some negative feelings about it in my gut. And this was the kick in the rear that I needed to make the decision to walk away.
Yeah.
And the day I made a call and an email, oh my God, CJ, I was like a new person. My husband said, what's gotten into you? I said, I feel so free because I stood up for my worth.
Yeah.
And I am happier because I said, I'm done with this.
Yeah. It's like, it's liberation,
It
right?
is.
And it was because you were willing to say yes that you had the ability to walk away and feel good about it. And I think that that's something that people also forget all the time. And if that's one thing, ladies, if you're listening out there, you're not stuck, right? People
You can make
feel
change.
yes, and people feel stuck. And I have done this in the past too, where it's like, okay, well, I can't do this because if I do this, then this, and if I do this, then this, and you just get yourself in this perpetual loop where you feel like you can't make a move. And it's once you start to actually say yes and get involved in new things, or spread yourself a little further than you were initially willing to go, you start to see those doors opening.
They do.
And then it makes it so much easier to say, okay, you know what? Now I can walk away from this that's not serving me because I no longer need to, make these window treatments in my basement, right? I can do the things that I want to do and I can focus over here.
Yeah.
What is the biggest takeaway that you want people to have when they read the book?
Oh boy, that's tough. I think there are two. For me, at the core of it is that one person's inability to love and appreciate what you bring to the table does not define you. And for me, that was a huge thing. And I think for women, that's often a big thing, whether it's the parent relationship or a partner,
right?
But overall, I think it goes back to that doing it yourself doesn't mean doing it alone. That there are people out there that will help you, that will lift you, that will push you off the cliff when you need to jump into that new opportunity, and just open up to it.
Yeah, and you're a living example of that. You have a supportive husband of what you're trying to do. You have a son who started helping you at the age of 13 with the production aspect, and that spawned his career because, he stepped in and was willing to help mom. So I definitely could not agree with you more. And I thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Everybody, I promise we will put all the details on how you can find out more about Beth Allen and DIY Hip Chicks and really start to get involved in these things too. Please make sure that if you have questions, send a comment to us. Ask us. Beth is always willing to answer questions, myself here too as well. But the one thing that we want you to take away today as you close out this episode is just understanding that say yes, give it a try. Don't sell yourself short. The biggest thing is don't say you can't do it before you've even tried or even looked into it, right? There's so much more out there for you and for your family. So go out and get it. Thank you, Beth, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, CJ.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today in the Den. This is CJ Bachmann with Beth Allen. We appreciate it. Have a great day.